What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. If you're new here, I'll introduce myself very briefly. My name's Simon Hill. I'm a Black American from Louisiana. Been traveling around the world for the past few years. I do this YouTube channel just for fun, just for educational purposes, edutainment purposes. And today we're going to be talking about a story that I find very interesting. I have the live stream chat open on my phone. This is a very hood YouTube channel. We're going to find a way to do a call-in live stream show one day. I'm probably going to open up a Twitter space so people can call in, talk to me, and that sort of thing. And yeah, I got a few things planned to be released on this channel very soon. Y'all go check out some of my other content, my travel content. Y'all go check out my writing that I do for Culturalist Theory. It's another YouTube channel where we rank albums from best to worst. I've released 2 videos with them so far, so y'all go check that out and support them. People pile into the chat, talk to me, build with me, and yeah, today we're just gonna have fun, do a few live streams, talk about a few things. We might be on for a few hours today, and this one might be a bit all over the place because as you see on the screen, I got more than a few tabs open. So we're gonna talk today about the story about our young brother, Travis King, a Black soldier in the US military who tried to escape to North Korea. And I start all of these live streams off with a map because unfortunately, a lot of people in the world don't know geography, unfortunately. So yeah, I know a few of you have seen those videos where Americans go viral for not being able to point to Russia on a map or Canada on a map or Brazil on a map or that sort of thing. It's very bad with geography. So we always start off with these stories with geography. So here is Asia, this large continent over here, the largest continent in the world, and here is North Korea, a small state, comparatively speaking, when we look at some of the other countries in Asia. North Korea is a country that is divided. Basically, there's South Korea, a capitalist, more developed nation by Western standards, and then we have North Korea, a dictatorial, autocratic, communist regime that basically was propped up by the Soviet Union. There was a war in the Korean Peninsula many decades ago. Basically, the Soviets, the communists, supported the North, and the West supported the South. The war ended up in a stalemate, and essentially the peninsula was divided, and it remains divided to this day. Hopefully there is unification, or hopefully we can have peace in the world. And North Korea is a country that has been developing nuclear weapons on its own. They're very isolated. They're under heavy sanctions. The people suffer from the sanctions, not the top brass, because all the elite North Korean leaders live in luxury, and they all live in Pyongyang, the capital right here, where they drive Mercedes-Benzes and eat Nutella. And the people, the regular people of North Korea, suffer. And Seoul, South Korea is a very, very modern, developed nation. And along this border right here, we have the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. Essentially, North Korea and South Korea never officially ended their war. They're just at a state of armistice. It's like a truce. It's just a truce, but the hostilities never ended. And both sides seek to reunify the peninsula. South Korea believes they should control all of the peninsula of the Koreas, and North Korea believes that they should control all of the southern part, and they want to unify. And still they are at a state of war. America heavily supports South Korea, and we send hundreds of thousands of US soldiers, billions of US dollars to South Korea every year. Many US soldiers are stationed at the demilitarized zone, and it's a very, very heavy place. So we have our brother, Travis King, this young Black man right here, as you can see. Hold on, wait, let me log into my New York Times subscription. Can I read this article? Let me see if I can read the full article, because I have a New York Times subscription. Y'all build with me. Y'all stay with me. Let me log in real quick. Let me make sure I can read this. All right, cool. We're in here. All right, let's close that up. All right, cool. All right, my subscription is good. So yeah, anyway, we have this young brother, Travis King. He was a soldier in the US Army. I find his story very interesting because this young Black man tried to run across the DMZ and escape the US military and tried to defect to North Korea. Very interesting story. Let's get into it. So, American soldier who crossed into North Korea in July is in US custody. Private Travis T. King dashed across the inter-Korean demilitarized zone in July. North Korea expelled him after finding him guilty of illegally intruding into its territory. So I just want to say this. I've said this multiple times before. I don't believe black men should be serving in the U.S. military. I don't believe, as long as America has a foreign policy that is aggressive to the rest of the world, as long as we are hurtful and harmful to the rest of the world, black men should not be a part of serving that institution. When America goes abroad and drops bombs on Iraqi civilians, when we kill innocent Afghanis, when we carpet bomb Vietnam, when we drop bombs all over Cambodia, when we overthrow democratically elected leaders in Latin America, black men should not be a part of that process. If the white supremacists want to do that, if they want to, destroy the world and destroy other people's homelands, we should not be a part of that. I believe we should take the Muhammad Ali approach and not serve in an army, in a military force that is excessively aggressive to the rest of the world, period. If you are a black man in the U.S. military, I encourage you to follow all their rules. Don't, go AWOL. Don't, try to do anything illegal while in the U.S. military. If you are in it, I encourage you to leave it. I lost a very good friend to the U.S. military. My friend George Anthony Way, I have his name tattooed on my arm right here, served 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, came back to America and offed himself. So I have a very negative view about the U.S. military and what it does to our people and what it does to other people across the world. And young brother Travis King, I don't believe that there could have been a better way for him to get out of this situation. But yeah, that's what I just have to say. So let's read this article here. So this is by Joe Sang-hun and Michael D. Shea, published on September 27th, 2023. So Private Travis T. King, the American soldier who crossed into North Korea on July 18th, was released into U.S. custody on Wednesday after weeks of diplomacy mediated by the Swedish government, American officials said. Sweden, by the way, is one of the few countries that has direct diplomatic talks with North Korea. And for some reason, whenever North Korea has problems with the outside world, the Swedes get involved and they're the mediators for whatever reason. I don't even know why. So Private King was to be reunited with his family in the United States and given physical and mental health support after being held by the North Koreans for 70 days. U.S. officials have secured the return of Private Travis King from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, said in a statement. Private King's first stop after leaving North Korea was China, where U.S. officials were waiting for him, according to senior administration officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the transfer. Private King was then put on a plane and flown to a U.S. military facility in South Korea, an American official said. The official said Private King would be immediately transferred to a military plane for a flight to a U.S. medical facility in San Antonio, where he would undergo examinations. Private King is expected to arrive in Texas late Wednesday or early Thursday. Very interesting story. I'm sure the people above him, the lieutenants, commanders, whatever the rankings are above him, got in very serious trouble for letting this brother get away like this. I'm sure in the military, you're responsible for the people under you. So I'm sure all the commanders, lieutenants, generals, whoever is above him got reprimanded heavy for letting this private, and a private, I believe, is one of the lowest ranks in the U.S. military, for being able to escape to North Korea. I mean, come on now. That's crazy. Let's keep building, though. So the official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss flight details said that the Swedish authorities had determined that Private King was healthy enough to be flown directly back to the United States without a medical examination at U.S. military facilities in South Korea or Japan. His release came after North Korean officials decided to expel him, saying that they found him guilty of illegally intruding into their territory, according to the North official Korean Central News Agency. The state news agency said that Private King had confessed to illegally entering North Korea because it said he harbored ill feelings against inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination within the U.S. Army and was disillusioned about the unequal U.S. society. Very interesting that he would say that. It's very interesting the North would send him back first and foremost, because I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe the North still is at war with South Korea and all of their allies, and the U.S. being their allies. So if a U.S. soldier crosses into their territory saying that they want to defect, usually in war, if soldiers cross that line and go to the enemy side with their hands up, waving the white flag, guns on the floor, whatever, they usually accept those people as deserters and treat them, as prisoners, and then try to, figure out what they're going to do and then integrate them into the military or something like that. I mean, that's been done plenty of times in war. There have been so many defectors on both sides of a conflict that then switch sides and then they're used as assets by the other side. Very interesting that North Korea didn't see this young man as an asset. And also North Korea as well is a country that makes it very, how can I say, prominent, their feelings about the US in their media. We, sometimes videos go viral of like North Korean news agencies or propaganda agencies saying that the US is a racist country, xenophobic country. It's a country that hates minorities. It's a white supremacist nation, that sort of thing. This sort of messaging has come out of North Korea. So I thought they would see that as a benefit to say, oh, look, the US is so racist. Their black soldiers are now coming to North Korea to try to be amongst us. I thought that would be something that they would try to capitalize on in the propaganda war and the ideological war against the US. But maybe there were some greater forces above them that said, hey, this guy is not worth it, or the US was going to cut some deal, because I guess it all comes down to money too. Maybe the US was like, hey, we'll give you money under the table, will help you get food or grain for your people because the North Korean people are starving, that sort of thing. Just send this guy back because this is going to look bad on us. Plus, we don't know what this young man knows, so let's get him back because, we don't want our intelligence being leaked through this private who went crazy and tried to run to North Korea. Let's continue building. So, a senior administration official said President Biden, who had been briefed on the efforts to secure Private King's release, made no concessions to North Korea. The answer is simple, the official said. There was none. Full stop. Interesting. The official thing might be that, oh, we didn't give North Korea any concessions. We didn't, lift our sanctions. We didn't give them any money. We didn't make any special deals for them. But possibly that's a lie. I mean, these intelligence agencies, they're going to be top secret about that. It might have been an order directly from Biden to say, hey, get this guy back no matter what. You know what I mean? Who knows what really happened behind closed doors. But honestly, I believe that something happened to get them back because I see too many benefits. Of North Korea having a Black American soldier defector who said he quit because of racial discrimination and that he's willing to work with North Korea. I think there's too many benefits for North Korea to have that guy than to just say, yeah, let's give him back to the Americans, the guys who are putting sanctions on us and who, want to bomb us at any moment and stuff like that. So I don't know. It doesn't seem right with me. There's obviously something that happened behind the scenes, in my opinion. So Private King, 23, had been assigned to South Korea as a member of the 1st Brigade Combat Team, 1st Armored Division, after being released in July from a South Korean detention center where he had spent time on assault charges. He was escorted by U.S. military personnel to Incheon International Airport outside Seoul to board a plane to the United States, where he was expected to face additional disciplinary action. He never boarded the plane. Instead, he fled to the north through the demilitarized zone, which separates North and South Korea, by taking a bus the next day to the border village of Panmunjom, which lies inside the DMZ and allows tourists to visit. The soldier, willfully and without authorization, crossed the military demarcation line into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Colonel Isaac Taylor, the public affairs officer for U.S. Forces Korea, said at the time. Interesting. So he was in trouble. This guy was in trouble for assault charges. And I remember, and I think we'll read about this in some of the other stories that we're going to read today. I think that this guy got in trouble for getting into a fight in South Korea because I think some of the South Koreans were being racist towards him. Maybe he got into a fight because some of the people were calling him N-words or racial slurs in Korean for Black people. He got into a fight in Korea, got in trouble in the military, and was like, you know what, I'm sick of this stuff, dealing with racism in South Korea, dealing with racism in the U.S. Army. Let me go to North Korea because maybe there's no racism there. What a dummy. Yeah, Travis, you're kind of dumb for that. And yeah, you shouldn't have been getting into trouble in the U.S. military. You should have just got out. The military. Let's get into the comments. Craig Matt says, what's good, Simon? How do you think they were treating him there? You know how they do us. Yeah, man. I mean, the U.S. military is, historically racist. And we're going to read about that today. Trust me, I got that lined up I got that lined up. We're going to talk about that. Deep-rooted racism, discrimination permeates U.S. military. We're going to talk about that heavy today. But yeah, possibly this guy was, getting into a lot of trouble, was dealing with the cognitive dissonance of being a black man from the richest country in the world here to represent freedom. Meanwhile, in our country, black people do not receive freedom, do not have justice, do not have true equality under the law. It's possibly, that thing was going on in his mind. Like, how do I reconcile this? Or maybe he was just crazy. Maybe he was just not getting enough South Korean pussy. Maybe he was just not getting enough booty in South Korea. And that's why he was like, you know what? I'm going to try my luck in North Korea. They ain't never seen a black man up there. I'm gonna bring some BBC to the DRC, DRK. All right, Craig Mack says North Korea. I wonder how they were treating them there. I wonder what the food is like in North Korea. Koreans are famous for fried chicken. You think they got good fried chicken up there in North Korea? I doubt it. I don't know. I don't know how they were treating them. Let's try to find out. I can't wait to read his interview. All right, but it's very interesting. Brittany Griner went to jail in Russia, and they got her out quick, and now she came back like a hero. And even though this guy left the U.S. military, I wonder who's going to be the first one to do that interview. Is Gayle King going to sit down with him? You know what I mean? Is he going to sit down on The View and talk to, what's her name, Whoopi Goldberg? I want Travis to do some interviews, man, like Brittany Griner. Let's get into the comments. So, Messi McGuire, I think North Korea expelling him without a scratch, allegedly, is very humane call on their part. That young man was going through it, and I'm sure his family is glad to see him again. Yeah, Messi McGuire, you have a very good point. I mean, expelling him, is good. Because North Korea does usually, when they capture Americans, they send them to them labor camps, beat them over the head. What was that guy? There was a guy, Wobbler, something like that. One of those like Christian missionaries who went there in North Korea, tried to like bring the Bible there, and they sent him to a North Korean detention camp, beat him over the head. He came back and died in the U.S. from brain damage, and that happens. I mean, it is very humane because. Let's not get it twisted. North Korea is a very inhumane country. Look how they treat their own people and stuff like that. It's crazy. But I do think it might be a bit inhumane if the guy said, I'm trying to get away from a country or a situation that's very racist, very discriminatory, where my people are treated unfairly. It's unfair to send that person back because, like, if somebody came to my country, right, and said, I'm fleeing war, oppression, racism, xenophobia, in my country, I would be wrong to send them back if I have a safe place to stay. You get what I'm saying? So, it kind of goes both ways. It's a tricky situation. Let's continue building, though. So American officials offered few details on what they said was a truly complex operation to retrieve Private King from one of the world's most isolated countries. They said that the key was Sweden's government, which serves as the so-called protecting power or diplomatic go-between for the United States and North Korea. Officials said the United States had learned from Sweden several weeks ago that the North Koreans had decided to expel Private King in the near future. That kicked off a period of indirect but intense negotiations between the United States and North Korea and direct discussions with China. The effort to protect Private King was part of the discussion that Mr. Sullivan had with Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China during 2 days of high-level discussions in Malta this month, according to a senior administration official. It's so crazy. This young black man from where was he from? Tennessee, something like that, Kentucky, whatever. This young black man caused these powerful countries to meet all over the world to talk about what's going to happen to him. Like this young guy, just decides he wants to go get some North Korean booty. This young man runs across the border because he's sick of racism in the U.S. and he want to bring some black stick to North Korea. You know what I mean? And now he got all these diplomats across the world arguing about what's going to happen to him and stuff like that. That's crazy to think about, man. The world is weird. This is a weird story. So let's continue reading. So the result of the negotiations and discussions was the operation on Wednesday, in which Swedish officials entered North Korea, took custody of Private King, and brought him to China. He was then flown to the U.S. military facility. U.S. officials praised the Chinese government for its assistance in facilitating Private King's departure from the country, but insisted that China did not participate in mediating the talks with North Korea in the past several weeks. The U.S. officials declined to say why they believe North Korea decided to release Private King after a relatively short time. North Korea said last month that Private King had wanted to seek refuge there or in a third country. In its announcement on Wednesday, it did not elaborate on why it had decided not to grant his wish. I wish North Korea said so. You know, I'm pretty sure Dennis Rodman could go to North Korea and get asylum. Dennis Rodman be in and out of North Korea. Why can't they let the young man stay? Let him chill. Let him chill for a bit. You know what I mean? Like, think about it. Like, if North Korea was like, yo, Travis, you can kick it for like a good year. We'll give you like a good year. Explore North Korea. He could become like a real asset, for real, for real. Like, North Korea should have been thinking like, this is the opportunity for us to get goodwill amongst black folk. And let's keep it real. When black folk love you, we with you forever. Keep it real. We still rocking with R. Kelly. Keep it a buck. I still jam some R. Kelly. I don't approve of what he did. But when black folk rock with you, we rock with you heavy, forever. So North Korea could have been had black folk on their side if they let Travis King stay up in there, you know, shoot a few Instagram reels, you know what I mean? Like, become an asset, you know, really become an asset. You know what I mean? But let's get to some comments right here. So Dom John said, some North Korean shnu. I don't know what that means. And Messi McGuire said, facts, bro. I don't know what he's saying facts to, but shout out to Messi McGuire. Shout out to Dom John. Thanks for everybody tuning in. Let's make this a fun, interesting live stream. All comments, all chats, everything. Y'all welcome to leave. So let's build on this. So, all right, North Korea last month said Private King had wanted to seek refuge. All right, we already read that. U.S. officials declined to say what disciplinary action, if any, would be taken after Private King returned to the United States. His mother, Claudine Gates, was grateful to the United States and those who worked for her son's release for a job well done, said her spokesman, Jonathan Franks. Private King was the first known American held in North Korean custody since Bruce Brian Lawrence was detained for a month after illegally entering the country from China in 2018. I never heard about that story. Never heard about that story. I wonder what happened to him. American civilians accused of illegal entry have been prosecuted and sentenced to hard labor, or sometimes released and expelled. In the cases of some civilians accused of illegal entry, North Korea has used them as bargaining chips in negotiations with Washington, with which it has no formal diplomatic ties. Exactly. So when the U.S. Diplomat said earlier, oh, we got Travis back without any concessions for North Korea, you know, we know that's a lie. You know, anytime North Korea gets their hands on some Americans or Western foreigners from, you know, powerful nations, I'm pretty sure they treat them just the way ISIS does. We give them for ransom or we're going to like behead them. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they do. I mean, that's how North Korea operates, you know, from what we see. All right. Dom John said, Dennis Rodman, please spare my son, Mr. Kim. That's funny, man. Maybe Dennis Rodman got him back. Maybe Dennis Rodman called up Kim like, yo, Kim, I heard you got my boy Travis there. Oh, wait, who can do a good Dennis Rodman impression? I can't. Yo, Kim. Yo, Kim, it's Dennis. Yo, it's Dennis, man. Let Travis out, man. That's a bad Dennis Rodman, man. But shout out to Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman got Travis back. That's what's missing in the story. That's what needs to be told. Dennis Rodman called up Kim and got him back. But anyway, let's continue building. So in the death in 2017 of Otto F. Warmbier, a University of Virginia honors student who spent 17 months in captivity in North Korea, received widespread attention. That's who I was talking about. Yeah, the death, Otto Warmbier, that's the guy. He was a student. I think this is the guy who either brought Bibles to North Korea or he was trying to tear down some like North Korean propaganda posters and try to take them back. And that's highly illegal in North Korea. You can't do that. So let's continue building. So Mr. Warmbier was detained at the Pyongyang airport in early January 2016, charged with a hostile act against the country's authoritarian government and convicted less than 2 months later of trying to steal a propaganda poster. Yep, that's who he was. After he delivered a tearful televised confession, his trial lasted 1 hour. He was evacuated from North Korea after spending more than a year in a coma and died soon after. Yep, that's what I remember. I remember that video that Wambier did. Basically, he was crying in front of the North Koreans, like, "I'm so sorry for what I did," and the North Korean soldiers are standing right next to him, all hard faced and stuff. And they took him to jail and whooped his ass and sent him back to the U.S. and then he died. Now that's not right, but we have to understand in war, propaganda is very powerful. Propaganda is very, very powerful. Images are very, very powerful. And what North Korea does, and I have to salute North Korea on this. I have to salute North Korea on this. And y'all might think I'm crazy, but North Korea does a very good job of fighting propaganda wars with the white supremacists. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. Think about this. North Korea is a country that has not that many mineral resources. They only have a lot of coal. They don't have oil. But how is this country, isolated from the rest of the world, able to develop nuclear weapons? Despite all the rich, powerful white nations in the world putting heavy sanctions on them, threatening to kill them, they stood their nuts. A lot of people say Asian people got little dicks. Well, the North Koreans got at least big ass balls, if not big dicks, because these niggas are like, yo, we don't give a fuck. We gonna build nuclear weapons. We gonna launch them at Japan. We gonna hold our nuts. We gonna juche. We gonna hold our own. Y'all might think I'm crazy, but that's very powerful against the white supremacists. Think about that. There's no country in the world that the white supremacists can't, manipulate, dominate, overthrow, topple without impunity. Like the white supremacists have done that all throughout Africa, all throughout Latin America, all throughout the Middle East, but they couldn't do it to North Korea. Let's keep it a buck. There could have been we could have had nuclear weapons in Africa. Niger has all that uranium. Zimbabwe has all that gold and uranium and diamonds. There should be a nuclear-powered African nation or a black nation with nuclear weapons. But North Korea, a country without uranium, without any sort of mineral resources that would allow them to develop the bomb, they sort of did it. And I have to salute them for that on one hand. Because think about that. We don't complain that France has nuclear weapons, Britain has nuclear weapons, America has nuclear weapons, Israel has nuclear weapons. We don't complain about those countries having nuclear weapons. Why? Even though some of these countries have done some of the worst atrocities against people on the planet. But everybody wants to attack North Korea for having nuclear weapons, and they didn't drop a bomb on Japan, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Let's keep it a buck here. Y'all might think I'm tripping about this, but shout out to the North Koreans for standing up against the white supremacists, holding their own nuts, and keeping it real. I'm just keeping it real here. So anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about this. So there was a story here. Travis King isn't the first U.S. soldier to enter North Korea. Here's a history. Now, I wonder why the other soldiers got to stay and Travis didn't. I wonder why. I mean, look at the picture here. This is one of them, obviously. This guy right here. I wonder why he got to stay in North Korea and Travis didn't. This guy was a soldier too who defected. I wonder why he got to stay though. Let's look about that. Let's read about this. This was published on July 19, 2023. So a U.S. soldier is reportedly being held in North Korea after bolting across the border, becoming the first American service member to do so in over 4 decades. It is still unclear whether Private Second-Class Travis King intended to defect, though experts say a trip to the demilitarized zone takes days of planning. U.S. officials say he crossed willfully and without authorization. The 23-year-old has been stationed in South Korea, where he was recently imprisoned on assault charges and was due to fly back to the U.S. to face military disciplinary action. Instead, he ditched his escort at the airport, made his way to the Korean border village of Panmunjom, where he joined a tour, dressed in civilian clothes, and ran across the military demarcation line at the last stop. Crazy, man. Crazy, crazy. And the crazy thing is, this kid looks like my cousin, man. Looks like one of my brothers, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. He looks like, low-key kind of looks like me, looks like me if I was when I was about 17, though my hairline was not that far back. Boy, my hairline was immaculate when I had it. I'm telling y'all see me now shining and glistening, looking like the modern, Morris Chestnut. No, I'm joking. But yeah, man, my hairline when I had it, it was immaculate. Anyway, let's continue building. We believe he is currently in Democratic People's Republic of Korea custody and are working with our Korean People's Army counterparts to resolve this incident. U.S. Forces Korea spokesperson Colonel Isaac Taylor said in a statement. North Korean officials are likely interrogating and screening King to determine what to do with him, says historian Eric Scott, the author of a book about Cold War defectors. They have in the past both imprisoned defectors, but also used them for propaganda, having them star in films, using them either as themselves in these films or as American soldiers to portray the U.S. side in an unflattering light, Scott told Morning Edition on Wednesday. About a half dozen American service members have crossed the border since the Korean War ended in 1953, a relatively small group whom Scott says loom large in North Korean propaganda. The last such case was in 1982. Very interesting. Very interesting. That number doesn't include the several American civilians who have been detained in North Korea over the years, such as college student Otto Warmbier, whose death in 2017 after he was released in a coma prompted the U.S. to ban American citizens from traveling to the country with which it has no diplomatic relations. While many may think of defection as a political choice between ideologies, Scott says he learned from his book research that people's motivations are often very mixed. Some face problems at home. Some, like King, evidently, face disciplinary issues, and others act on a whim. Very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people might leave the military, right? Like you might leave or do something crazy in the military because you're sick of it and tired of it, right? A lot of people that join the U.S. Army, they're 18, 19 years old, don't have that much experience outside of their small towns where they come from or outside of the U.S. Then they get thrown into these crazy situations like being an 18-year-old carrying an M16 on a border with a country with nuclear weapons like North Korea. So, it takes a heavy psychological toll because we literally use child soldiers. If we think about it, should an 18-year-old be told to go to Afghanistan or Iraq and shoot at grown-ass men? I mean, seriously, what these kids go through, what my friend George went through when he was sent to Iraq and Afghanistan 2 times. It's very troubling. If you have kids, or if you did have kids and you had an 18-year-old, would you want them flown across the world and told to stand guard at the DMZ at South Korea and North Korea? Like, no, man, come on, man. It's crazy what we literally do to our children to tell them to, be soldiers for us, die for a nation that doesn't even respect them. Think about that. And I think what Travis was going through was probably very traumatic. Not being able to get laid in South Korea has to be hard, especially when you see all the other white soldiers, swimming in pussy. Meanwhile, you're out there, just barely getting any matches on Tinder or at the bar, and the girls think that you're an African refugee or something like that. It's crazy, man. He's probably going through a lot. Probably went through a lot and was probably like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm gonna go to Pyongyang. I'm gonna go to Pyongyang and do my thing. Water break. Anyway. What's remarkable about it is that through this act, although it's a very dangerous one and has very serious consequences, they're catapulted from relative unknowns into international celebrities of a sort that everyone is talking about, Scott adds. Even so, it's been a while since such defectors have been in the headlines. Here's a look back at their stories. So, Private Larry Allen Abshir. Abshir was the first U.S. soldier to defect to North Korea after the Korean War, crossing the border at the age of 19 in May 1962. He had been deployed to South Korea the previous year and was caught smoking marijuana on duty several times, according to North Korean News, an American news site headquartered in South Korea. They were going to court-martial him or kick him out of the army, said Private First Class James Joseph Dresnok, who defected several months after him. Instead of going back to his old life, he just came over to the DPRK. Abshir and Dresnok were eventually joined by 2 more Americans, Corporal Jerry Wayne Parrish in December 1963 and Sergeant Charles Robert Jenkins in January 1965. The 4 lived together in a 2-bedroom house outside of Pyongyang, where they were forced to study the writings of then-leader Kim Il-sung and were subject to regular beatings. They were also featured prominently in propaganda magazines and movies. Oh, that sucks. That sucks. You're a 19-year-old kid, just left Kansas, got flown out across the world by the U.S. military. You ran across the border because you got caught smoking weed or you were sick of the sergeant yelling in your face. Next thing you know, you're in a 2-bedroom shack reading a little book in Korean that you can't read, forced to recite it like parts of the Quran for Muslims who don't speak Arabic. And meanwhile, a little Korean man is just beating you over the head with a stick. Speak louder, read louder. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That's why I laughed. I'm not laughing at them getting tortured. I'm just laughing at the absurdity of the situation. It's funny. It's absolutely funny. Should be a movie. It should be a movie. That could be a good movie with what's that fat guy's name? What's the fat guy's name that's in all the comedy movies? He was in that recent movie with Eddie Murphy. Anybody know in the chat? The fat guy with the curly hair, but now he's skinny now. I forgot his name. Forgot his name. But anyway, I'll continue building. So the men became famous for playing evil Americans in a 20-part film series called Nameless Heroes. Documentary filmmakers Daniel Gordon and Nicholas Bonner told NPR in 2007, adding that they were still referred to by their characters' names even decades later. They were offered North Korean citizenship in 1972. NK News reports that when Jenkins asked what would happen if they refused, a government official said, "Then you won't be here tomorrow." Wow. So Abshir died of a heart attack in 1983 at the age of 40. While he had grown up in Ohio, his tombstone reportedly listed Pyongyang as his birthplace. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, Private First Class James Joseph Dresnach. Dresnach dashed across the border in broad daylight in 1962 out of frustration. He was divorced, serving on DMZ Stake Outpost, and about to be court-martialed for forging his sergeant's signature to visit a woman, he told the 2006 documentary Crossing the Line. "I was fed up with my childhood, my marriage, my military life, everything," he said. "There's only one place to go, North Korea." Yes, when life is hard, when you just want to restart, when you want to refresh, don't give up. Come to Pyongyang. If you're sick of the CEO dancing in the videos, being all on the records, come to the DPRK. Oh man, that's crazy. So, by the time the documentary was released, he was being billed as the last American defector still in North Korea. Gordon and Bonner, the filmmakers, said time had seemed to pass Dresnach by. He left America in 1962, and really the last time he was there regularly was 1959, Gordon told NPR. So his accent, his dialect, and his use in vocabulary is from a 1950s American, and without any external influences. And elements like landing on the moon, Cuban Missile Crisis, they all sort of seem to have passed him by. That's crazy. That's crazy. They said that while the other defectors regretted their decision, Dresnach essentially decided not to run any further. He told the filmmakers that he wouldn't leave North Korea. If you put $1 billion of gold on the table, he ain't gonna leave. Boy, that Korean coochie must be tight. It got him stuck there. Boy, he is loving North Korea. Ain't that crazy? For $1 billion, I wouldn't leave America. I would burn my U.S. passport for $1 billion. You wouldn't leave North Korea for $1 billion? That's crazy. I wonder what it must be. They must have something there. I don't know, man. I don't know. And despite his re-education, they said, he had managed to retain his individuality and some independence. He was still going fishing regularly at the time, for example. Dresnach married a woman from Romania who said she had been tricked into traveling to and forced to remain in Pyongyang, according to Jenkins' book. Their two sons released a video in 2017 saying he had died of a stroke the previous year. Oh, that's sad. That's sad. I wonder what happened to those kids. Who knows? Corporal Jerry Wayne Parrish, 19-year-old Parrish was patrolling the demilitarized zone in 1963 when he dropped his supplies and crossed the border, according to the Kentucky newspaper, The Gleaner. He left a note on top of his rifle. "Tell mother I love her. I'll be back home someday. Tell my friends goodbye." It's not clear why Parrish, who reportedly had an unembellished service record, defected. His mother was convinced at the time that he had been captured. Radio Pyongyang said he had been concerned about his job prospects after the army and heard that everyone in North Korea had a job, the Gleaner reported. During his years in North Korea, Parrish, who was apparently one of the best actors in the propaganda series, married a Lebanese woman and had 3 sons. Very interesting. It seems like North Korea is trying to breed the next generation of white people because all the white guys, most of the white guys at least, from what they're saying, they hook them up with white women or white adjacent women and then make them have kids. It seems like they're trying to breed a certain section of white people in North Korea so that they can have the next generation of movie stars in their country to play in propaganda films. Very sick, very weird. What a weird thing to do. Like you have to, trick women into coming there, kidnap them, and for the white American soldiers that are defectors, you have to make them like mates like dogs. It's crazy. But see, North Korea is very good. They're very good at attacking the white supremacist mind because think about it. That's what the white supremacists did for us in years. In the U.S., we had slave breeding farms. After the importation of African slaves was banned, what did the white supremacists do? They didn't say, "Oh, let's end slavery. Maybe this is bad." They said, "You know what? Let's make them Negroes buck each other. Let's make them hump on each other. Put a bag over their head. We don't even care if they sleep with their own mothers or sisters. Let's just make them breed and have more slaves." That's why we have 40 million, black people in America today, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, very, very crazy story what's happening in North Korea. So there are conflicting reports of his death. Jenkins testified during his court martial that Parrish died in 1996 of an abdominal infection, though the Crossing the Line documentary says he died of kidney disease in 1998. Interesting. So Sergeant Charles Robert Jenkins, this is him as well. So Jenkins was stationed in the demilitarized zone in South Korea in 1965. When drunk on 10 beers, he walked across the border to avoid facing combat duty in Vietnam. The U.S. Army sergeant, who was 24 at the time, later called that the biggest mistake I ever made. He said he thought he would be handed over to the Soviet Union and eventually return to the U.S. in one of their semi-regular Cold War era prisoner exchanges, as NPR reported. I know I was not thinking clearly at the time, and a lot of my decisions don't make sense now, but at the time they had a logic to them that made my actions seem almost inevitable. Jenkins wrote in 2008 in The Reluctant Communist, my desertion, court-martial, and 40-year imprisonment in North Korea. God damn, this man did more time than Nelson Mandela. This man did more time than Mandela in North Korea. How did you survive? How did you survive? That's a soldier. That's a real soldier. So Jenkins spent his first 8 years in North Korea being held in a small room with 3 other American defectors, forced to read the works of North Korean leaders and subject to frequent beatings. That's just a funny image to me, and you guys know why. At one point, a doctor sliced the U.S. Army tattoo off his forearm without anesthesia, the New York Times reported. Very, very savage. Just savage. Just cut that thing out. Yeah, man. He later appeared in propaganda movies and leaflets and taught English to North Korean spies and military cadets. Several years later, he married Hitomi Soga, a Japanese citizen who had been kidnapped by North Korea as part of an effort to teach the language and culture to spies. North Korea admitted in 2002 to abducting more than a dozen Japanese citizens during the 70s and 80s. Interesting. There was a famous actress. There was a famous Japanese actress. I know this story that basically Kim Il Sung, I think the daddy of the current North Korean president, kidnapped a Japanese actress and brought her to North Korea to marry her and like sleep with her and R-word her because he just thought she was hot. Like that's how the North Koreans get down. Like if they find a bad broad abroad, they'll bring that broad home, and you got to marry Kim Il Sung. Like that's crazy. Like they do that. So Soga returned to Japan after she was released in 2002, and Jenkins and their 2 daughters were allowed to join her in 2004, more than 39 years after he first crossed the border. Jenkins pleaded guilty to desertion and aiding the enemy at his court-martial. He was demoted to private and dishonorably discharged, spent 25 days in the U.S. military brig, and was debriefed for 2 months about his knowledge of North Korea. He lived with his family on Japan's Sado Island, where he worked as a greeter at a tourist attraction and never fully stopped looking over his shoulder until his death in 2017 at age 77. What a very interesting life. What an interesting life this man led, What a very interesting life. All of these guys could have movies made about them. And I'm waiting for somebody to tell me, what do all of these guys have in common? We haven't seen their pictures, but we can assume why they got to stay in North Korea. Why did they get to stay in North Korea and Travis couldn't? I don't know. So Private First Class Roy Chung. So there were 2 more notable defections in the decades that followed. In 1979, Chung, born Chung Rae-sok, reportedly surfaced in North Korea 2 months after disappearing from his unit in West Germany. The 22-year-old South Korean immigrant was not a U.S. citizen, but had joined the U.S. Army the previously, reportedly for education benefits. The Washington Post reported at the time that Chung had originally been classified as a deserter, but that officials had little reason to doubt Pyongyang's radio announcement that he had defected to North Korea because he could no longer endure the disgraceful life of national insult and maltreatment that he had led in the U.S. imperialist aggressor army. All right, so this man, once again, this Asian person, I presume, he was South Korean, yeah, so he was, Asian. And so he was saying that there was a lot of racism in the U.S. military as well, and that it was imperialist as well. And there are a lot of people in the U.S. military who feel this way. You might think I am critical of the U.S. Army, but black men or anybody in the U.S. Army are uncritical of it, and they're blind followers. No, I've met U.S. soldiers or U.S. veterans who said that, the U.S. foreign policy is stupid. All of our foreign policy is stupid. Most of the wars that we have fought in have been stupid, and that the U.S. government does imperialism across the world. And so, yeah, this person sounds like he was turned up off ideology, and also he had a critique of the U.S. military that is not uncommon, especially for, rank and file soldiers. You know what I mean? So, Chung's parents told the newspaper they believed he was abducted by North Korean agents. He is believed to have died sometime around 2004, Radio Free Asia reports. So, Private Joseph T. White, while White defected in August 1982 by shooting the lock off a border gate in the early morning hours and walking through the Korean Times reports that he carefully made his way around minefields, yelling, "I am coming," and calling for help in Korean. Eyewitness reports in the United Nations Command later confirmed that nearly a dozen North Korean soldiers apprehended him and led him into a bunker. White's parents insisted he would not have defected. His mother described him in an interview that month as nothing but gung-ho army, a gung-ho patriot, and gung-ho Reagan. Okay, so yeah, it's always the ones that come from those very conservative, very, red families that end up doing the craziest stuff, North Korean propaganda leaflets were found in his belongings, though many young soldiers reportedly collected them. And North Korea released a video in which White criticized the U.S. government and claimed he had defected to demonstrate how unjustifiable it was for the U.S. to send troops to South Korea. A U.S. military investigation concluded the following month that White had indeed defected, though his parents, despite receiving a warm letter from President Ronald Reagan, continued to struggle to come to terms with that. "It just doesn't make any sense," his mother Kathleen said in one interview. "Why would Joey want to leave his ice cream, his chocolate syrup, and his money?" What the hell is she talking about? Chocolate syrup, his ice cream, and his money. What the chocolate? That's funny. What type of family is this? Did this boy have an addiction to like Nabisco and Bluebell? What is going on here? What's going on, Kathleen? You raised a big baby. A grown man talking about, "I miss my ice cream, my chocolate syrup, and money." Okay, are these code words for drugs? Let's keep it real. Is this code word for drugs? Anyway, White wrote his parents a single letter in February 1983. He said he was doing well and working as an English teacher for North Korean students and expressed love for his family, but did not say anything about what had happened the previous year. His family got another letter from North Korea in 1985, reportedly written by a friend of White's, informing them that he had drowned while swimming in a river during a picnic with friends. All right, so yeah, he got killed by the North Koreans. Yeah, so anyway, going and fleeing to North Korea is never the right idea. But guys, let's keep it a buck. North Korea is possibly a very racist nation as well, very anti-Black nation as well. Of course, in a very homogenous space, I'm pretty sure negative perceptions about Black people persist, and they are no exception from white supremacist thinking that being closer to whiteness, having lighter skin, or white aesthetic appearances are not more pleasing to the eye or more desired by the people there. So I'm pretty sure the North Koreans, still like many Asians, unfortunately, see white people as more beautiful, more desirable, more closer to civilization and want them to be around them. And I'm pretty sure most of the defectors who got to stay or turned into movie stars or were allowed to just live there and marry Lebanese pop singers or hot Japanese actresses. They were all white guys. Let's keep it a buck. We have to keep it a buck. And so while North Korea's leader might hang out with uh, Dennis Rodman, right? While Dennis Rodman might get invited, regular niggas like Lil Travis King are not. Travis King, you gotta go. Travis, you don't fit the aesthetic. You're not the right cultural fit, Travis. You gotta go. But guys like these guys, they get to stay. They get to stay. Doesn't matter if they're drug addicts. Doesn't matter if they were drunk on 10 beers when they ran across the country. Doesn't matter what. They get to say they're more willing to accept them than they are us. And we have to remember this, guys. I tell this all the time in my channel. We don't have any friends in this world. Black people don't have any friends. We don't have any people who are completely dedicated to eliminating white supremacy or stopping anti-Black racism or supporting us in that journey. There is no group of people other than us on this planet who are dedicated to fighting white supremacy tooth and nail until the very end. Period. It's not Asian people, not Arabs, not any off-white people who claim that they're oppressed too, or they're not white supremacists, or there's no anti-Black racism in their country. It's only us against the world, period. So running to North Korea, running to Budapest, Hungary, like where I am now, running anywhere in the world is not going to help us because we don't have any allies. The only way we can help us fight white supremacy in this world is to be on code and be unified with each other, period. All right, so let's read more about Travis's story. Let's read more. So what's Travis's punishment going to be? So potential punishment for Travis King unclear after return from North Korea. Here's a video, I guess, of him being led back into the U.S. Video shows moments Travis King steps foot back on U.S. soil. So with Army Private Travis King back in the U.S. after 2 months in North Korean custody, it's unclear if he will face disciplinary actions for running across the demarcation line into North Korea. Experts say it's possible King could be charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, possibly under 5 for desertion or Article 86 for going absent without leave. But it's unclear if the Army will take that step. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth said Tuesday that any punishment King could face would come from his chain of command after he completes the reintegration process at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. Right now, we're really focused on the reintegration process for Private King. We will get to the point where the chain of command will decide sort of what consequences he'll be facing in terms of the things that have happened, but we're not at that point right now, Wormuth said. Before running into North Korea in July, King had already faced criminal charges and was court-martialed by the Army in South Korea. CNN previously reported that King was expected to be administratively separated from the military after being found guilty in a court-martial hearing related to assault and other charges. The day before King crossed into North Korea, he was expected to board a flight from Seoul back to the U.S. Instead, officials told CNN King joined a tour of the joint security area inside the demilitarized zone, later running from the group to North Korea's side of the demarcation line. Now King is on temporary duty orders to Joint Base San Antonio as he completes the reintegration process, which Army spokesperson Bryce Doobie said includes medical care, decompression, and debriefing. King was reunited with his family over the weekend, Doobie added. The reintegration is the Department of Defense process of coordinating multiple activities with a recovered person, Doobie said, while protecting their health and welfare, with the goal of returning a physically and emotionally healthy Department of Defense member to duty as expeditiously as possible. What's the point of having the reintegration if most likely they're going to kick them out of the U.S. Army anyway? I mean, after doing this, is there really a need to reintegrate them? I know this is standard procedure and protocol, but most likely this guy will never be able to serve in the Army again. He's going to get kicked out. And what else is there to say about this story? So anyway, a spokesperson for King and his family declined to comment. Rachel Van Lendingham, a retired Air Force judge, advocate, and military law expert at Southwestern Law School, told CNN that she'd be surprised if the Army doesn't court-martial King for running over the border, though sending a deterrence message is often a factor in decisions to bring charges. In this case, she said, that likely isn't necessary. Do we really think there are a lot of soldiers who are going to sprint across to North Korea 99.9% of soldiers don't need to be deterred from doing this. Absolutely, because it's well documented what will happen if you go into North Korea. Most people won't do this. I think he was under extreme stress, or most likely had some sort of mental disability. But more than likely, he was really sick and tired of the racism in the US military, and that causes the mental distress. People don't realize, racism, when you go through it day in, day out as a Black man, takes a toll on you. One of the things that I believe saved my sanity was the fact that I work from home. I don't have to go into the office every day and smile and grin in the faces of people who talk crap about me behind my back or say anti-Black racist things right in front of my face, or to work in an institution that's inherently anti-Black, where I see discrimination and disparity right in front of my face. There are a lot of Black people in the US and abroad in the diaspora who go to work. They're the only Black face in that place, and they go through so much mental anguish and distress. It's really hard. I saw my own mother about these crackers at work who are so ignorant and they don't know what the hell they're talking about or what they're doing, but their word gets more credence than what she has to say, even though she has more education than them and more experience than them and knows what she's talking about. She has to deal with people who, just because they have the complexion, get selected to speak and to have their voices heard and their decisions made. It's crazy. And so that takes a toll on a lot of Black people's minds. And I'm pretty sure King was going through that the same way a lot of Black people go through that day in, day out, going to work, just dealing with the BS that goes into your mind. So let's continue building here. Army may want to avoid a full trial. Mark McCansian, a retired Marine Corps colonel and senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the Army will likely just want to get rid of him and not go through the efforts of a full trial. If they were going to do another trial, they have to assign them to a unit, whichever he is. He'd have to go to work every day for however long it took to get the court-martial together, and then hold the court-martial, and then have all the materials reviewed, because all that has to go to the headquarters of the Army. So could be 6 months, could be longer, Kansian said. Another factor in the Army's potential decision with King could be what information he's able to provide on North Korea. Van Landingham pointed to the case of Bowie Bergdahl, who pleaded guilty in 2017 to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy after he walked off post in Afghanistan in 2009 and was captured by the Taliban. Officials who debriefed Bergdahl when he returned to U.S. custody emphasized in his trial how cooperative he was in sharing information about the Taliban and his time in their custody. An official from the Pentagon's Joint Personnel Recovery Agency testified that Bergdahl was an extremely cooperative participant in his debriefs after returning to the U.S. One intelligence analyst described the information he provided to the U.S. as a gold mine. Those are factors that could impact court-martial, what he's doing right now and how cooperative he is with folks he's debriefing with on the intelligence side, Van Landingham said. Kansian said, however, it's unlikely King had any intelligence that would be of particular value, given that he wasn't there for a long time. Ultimately, Kansian said, referring King to a court-martial would require the Army to keep him around longer. I just don't think they want this guy around, Kansian said, referencing the misconduct issues King had in South Korea. My guess is they're going to process him out as quickly as they can. It's crazy how the Army works. You have to get a job while they figure out how to fire you from your job. That's crazy. But it's unclear what's going to happen to him as far as his punishment. In my opinion, the Army kicking him out and not putting him, in jail or anything would be the best option. The Army needs to look into his situation and other Black soldiers' situation, because, a lot of Black soldiers face racism every day in the U.S. military, and there needs to be a way to, deal with those things. I know the Army is headed by a Black man now. There's the leader of the Department of Defense. I forgot his name, big, tall, Black guy. But just because we have Black faces in high places doesn't mean that these spaces are safe for all races. Look at me, man. I'm like Jesse Jackson out here, just rhyming and styling all the time. But we need to make sure that the U.S. Army is, safe for Black people to be in, because whatever Travis was going through, he said it was because of racism. So there's a high possibility that is. Let's keep it a buck. That's not new. So let's look here. Let's look here. Racism drove U.S. soldier to defect North Korea. This was published on August 17th, 2023 by the Manila Times. By the way, all the links for all the articles that we will read today will be in the comment section, not in the description of this video, because last time I posted links to the articles on the description and YouTube flagged that. They gave me a warning because one of the links that I didn't even know had prawn on it. So we're not going to get flagged on this channel. We follow all the rules on YouTube to the T to make sure that we bring all the best information to all the people that are watching this channel. Anyway, continue reading. Seoul, Travis King defected to North Korea to escape mistreatment and racial discrimination in the U.S. Army, the country's state media said on Wednesday. Pyongyang's first official confirmation that they're holding the American soldier. Here's a picture of him, and all the North Koreans are like, oh. All right. No, I have to subscribe to unlock the article. No, that's not right. No, click here to follow this article. Man, I want to read more about it. I'm not paying for the subscription right here. All right, let's jump into the other one then. Let's jump into another one. All right, we already read this one. So, American soldier Travis King arrives back in the U.S. after being freed by North Korea. All right, we already read this. We already read about this. All right, Army still undecided on whether to punish Private Travis King, but potential charges loom. I think we already get the idea about this. All right. So, yeah, let's jump here instead to this article about racism in the U.S. military. This is more fascinating. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. We've already covered Travis King's story a lot. Let's jump into this. So, deep-rooted racism, discrimination permeate U.S. military. So, this was published on May 28, 2021, written by Kat Stafford, James Laporta, Aaron Morris, and Helen Weifering for APnews.com. For Stephanie Davis, who grew up with little, the military was a path to the American dream, a realm where everyone would receive equal treatment. She joined the service in 1988 after finishing high school in Thomasville, Georgia, a small town said to be named for a soldier who fought in the War of 1812. Over the course of decades, she steadily advanced, becoming a flight surgeon, commander of flight medicine at Fairchild Air Force Base, and eventually a lieutenant colonel. But many of her service colleagues, Davis says, saw her only as a Black woman, or for the white resident colleagues who gave her the call sign of ABW. It was a joke, they insisted. An angry Black woman, a classic racist trope. See, that's why I couldn't join the military, because they be giving people nicknames that I do not find funny, calling you shoe shine and all sorts of negative terms. ABW, angry Black woman, not cool, not cool. Ain't no time for all that. We're here to work. But see, that's the thing. They get kids, man. When you join the U.S. military, you're a kid. You're a kid. You're a kid, and you're around other kids who don't know better. So white subordinates often refused to salute her or seemed uncomfortable taking orders from her, she says. Some patients refused to call her by her proper rank or even acknowledge her. She was attacked with racial slurs, and during her residency, she was the sole Black resident in a program with no Black faculty, staff, or ancillary personnel. You know, I should have pulled up this article, but maybe we'll read about it because I think there's another one. There are rampant white supremacists in the U.S. military. There are people who come from the most rural, whitest parts of the country. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do they bring their racism with them. They do not care. They will not salute a Black woman. They won't hang around, other Black soldiers. They'll call you racial slurs. It's real. It's real, man. So the U.S. military is America in miniature. You find everything in the U.S. military just like how you find everything outside of the military. So for Blacks and minorities, when we initially experience racism or discrimination in the military, we feel blindsided, Davis said. We're taught to believe that it's the one place where everybody has a level playing field and that we can make it to the top with work that's based on merit. In interviews with the Associated Press, current and former enlistees and officers in nearly every branch of the armed services described a deep-rooted culture of racism and discrimination that stubbornly festers despite repeated efforts to eradicate it. The AP found that the military's judicial system has no explicit category for hate crimes, making it difficult to quantify crimes motivated by prejudice. The Defense Department also has no way to track the number of troops ousted for extremist views, despite its repeated pledges to root them out. More than 20 people linked to the January 6th siege of the U.S. Capitol were found to have military ties. Oh, what a surprise. What a surprise. People who were trained by the U.S. government to be sent abroad to topple other governments tried to topple our own. Ain't that irony? Didn't the war just come back home? Oh, the irony. What a coincidence. People from the military tried to overthrow the U.S. government on January 6th. And they say that white supremacy doesn't exist. Okay. All right. The AP has also found that the Uniform Code of Military Justice does not adequately address discriminatory incidents, and that rank and file people of color commonly face court-martial panels made up of all white service members, which some experts argue can lead to harsher outcomes. The military said it processed more than 750 complaints of discrimination by race or ethnicity from service members in the fiscal year 2020 alone. 750 complaints. Wow. That's more than 2 a day. That's like 2 a day, man. 750 complaints over 365 days. That's a lot. That's a lot of people complaining about racial discrimination. But discrimination doesn't exist just within the military rank and file. That same fiscal year, civilians working in the financial, technical, and support sectors of the Army, Air Force, and Navy also filed 900 complaints of racial discrimination and over 350 complaints of discrimination by skin color, data from the U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission shows. Interesting, very interesting. That's a lot of complaints. That's a lot of complaints of people saying, I'm not getting fair treatment based on how I look, which is not how it should be in the Army, where they say, be all you can be. This is the place where you're rewarded on merit. The harder you work, the more you'll receive. And instead, a lot of the times, we receive the opposite. Let's continue building. In February, Lloyd J. Austin III, a former Army general who is now Secretary of Defense, that's who he is. Yes, Lloyd Austin. Yeah. All right. A former Army general who is now Secretary of Defense, the first Black man to serve in the post, ordered commanders and supervisors to take an operational pause for one day to discuss extremism in the ranks with their service members. Austin gave commanders the latitude to address the matter as they saw fit, but emphasized the discussion should include the meaning of their oath, acceptable behaviors both in and out of uniform, and how service members can report actual or suspected extremist behavior through their chain of commands. Wow. So without a proper directive, Lloyd Austin just told all the white commanders and generals and Hispanic generals and commanders, and some of even the Black ones as well, hey, guys, just take a day off to talk about extremism, but without any sort of code to it. So who knows what the people were saying? I'm pretty sure a lot of the commanders who got up there in front of their units, they said, you know what, guys? We're here to protect the Constitution. We have an oath to the Constitution. And listen, guys, I don't see color. Your commander, General John Smith, I don't see color, guys. When I go to the hood, I just see people. I have a brother whose cousin, sister, best friend married a Black guy. I cannot be racist, guys. So listen, all this white supremacy and we want to, make America great again, all this sort of stuff, guys. Listen, we're here to protect the Constitution and not see color. We don't see color, okay? All right. Now, has anybody seen my green fatigues? I just can't seem to find them. All right, let's continue building. We need to give these commanders what they need to talk about. Tell them white supremacy is wrong. Anti-Black racism is wrong. Discrimination against all groups of people based on religion, skin color, their ethnicity, the language they speak, where they were born, all of that is wrong. That's not why we're here in the U.S. military. They need to tell them that explicitly. Don't just give people some free range to just talk about stuff or talk about extremism. Because I'm pretty sure one of those commanders would say, we need you guys to stop, reading all these Black Power books. We need you guys to stop, tattooing Black Panthers on your skin and that sort of thing. Like, they might start talking like that. Like, extremism is extreme for different people. You get what I'm saying? So we need to tell them explicitly what type of extremism that we're talking about. Anyway, let's continue building. So a recent poll from the Military Times showed that the stand down was received with mixed reviews. Some service members said their units went above and beyond, but others reported their trainers made disparaging comments that undercut the discussions and that the sessions were short and non-interactive. Absolutely. I knew it. Didn't even read that paragraph, but I knew that was going to happen. All right. The Southern Poverty Law Center sent Austin a letter shortly after his order, applauding him for his decisive action, but underscoring that systemic change on all military levels is urgent. Those who are indoctrinated into white supremacist ideology present a significant threat to national security and that the safety of our communities, SPLC President Margaret Huang wrote. In a statement to the AP, the Defense Department said extremism is not widespread in the armed forces, but acknowledged that efforts to stamp out extremist views from the rank and file have historically been reactive versus proactive until recently. Pentagon spokesperson Marjorie Caesar Santiago pointed to Austin's stand down order in February that stressed the oath of office taken by military personnel, including a commitment to protecting our nation from enemies, foreign and domestic. Santiago added that we know that far too many service members indicate they experience discrimination. He noted that the Defense Department had launched multiple efforts in the past year, including updating its anti-harassment policy, assessing its training on implicit bias, and developing data-driven strategies to guide efforts to attract and retain diverse members and also identify unhealthy work environments. When Davis was medically retired by the Air Force in 2019 after more than 2 decades of service, she felt ground down by overt racism and retaliated against for accusing a superior of sexually assaulting her. Ain't that a shame? Ain't that a shame? Served 2 years, served her country for 2 years, and walked out of it feeling defeated and demoralized due to all the racism and all the sexism that she went through as a woman. Ain't that a shame? That's not right. If you serve your country for 2 years, you should be able to walk out of that thing with your head held high, feeling proud, feeling gratitude, feeling like you're somebody who has accomplished something. Instead, what happens when a lot of Black people leave these institutions, just like when we leave our jobs, when we leave working for these, people who think less of us, we come out of it feeling dirty, feeling defeated, feeling less than like a man, less than like a woman, and that's not right. That's not right. So she noted how insidious racism can be to members of the ranks. Service members entrust their lives to their fellow troops, and a lack of cohesion in a unit can be deadly. It creates a harmful and dangerous work environment, Davis said, and a lot of us suffer in silence because we feel like there's nothing that can be done. In the midst of last year's summer of unrest sparked by police killings of Black Americans across the nation, Army General Mark A. Milley, who is also the Department of Defense's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told congressional leaders the military cannot afford racism or discrimination. We who wear the cloth of our nation understand that cohesion is a force multiplier, Milley said. Divisiveness leads to defeat. As one of our famous presidents said, a house divided does not stand. Austin pledged to rid the ranks of racists and extremists during his confirmation hearing before Congress, which came on the heels of the Capitol insurrection. I bet there are more racists in the U.S. military now than ever since this statement. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure of that. So, the job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies, he said, but we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our ranks. Yeah, but as long as we have a country where so many people are uneducated about the history of the United States, where so many people believe conspiracy theories that are going on right now, when so many people follow a charlatan like Donald Trump and believe in making America great again as if it was ever great in the first place and not on the process of becoming a great nation, as long as we have people like that in the U.S., oh, no, we will continue to see more racists in the U.S. military. And of course, even worse than that, we'll continue to have racist, evil foreign policy, like what we did to Afghanistan, like what we did to Iraq, like what we did to Korea, like what we did to Vietnam, like what we did to Cambodia, like what we did to Chile, like what we did to Iran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. America will continue to enact evil foreign policy across the world unless we end white supremacy, period. Let's continue building. So it's standard custom for enlisted personnel to show their respect to higher ranking colleagues by offering salutes that are held until the gesture is returned. When Marine Major Tyrone Collier was a newly minted second lieutenant and judge advocate, he had a profound experience with that practice. Collier, a Black man, was at Joint Base Myer Henderson Hall in Virginia when he was saluted by a Black enlisted Marine. But even after Collier acknowledged the gesture, the salute continued. Puzzled, Collier asked why the Marine held it for so long. He said, "Sir, I have just come to clean with something. We never see black officers. I just have to come clean with something. We never see black officers. We never see people like you, and it makes me extraordinarily proud," Collier recalled. You can imagine what it's like for a black enlisted Marine who, for example, might want to consider becoming a warrant officer or a commissioned officer, or who served under commander after commander and received so few opportunities to see people that look like them in higher ranks, Collier said. Representation really does matter. Yes, representation matters, but listen, guys, we can't get too hyped off black faces in high places. What good is having a black face if the US military is dropping drone bombs on black people in Niger? What good is a black face in a high place if the US military is putting sanctions on Cuba or Zimbabwe? What good is black faces in high places if the US military continues to enact horrible things to other people across the world? I mean, yes, I get happy when I see black men succeed in this world where our opportunities are limited and our expression is often attacked, right? I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see any black man win. But we can't be so happy that, we're going to salute a guy just for wearing a silly uniform. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. When we have to be honest. We have to be honest. We should salute black men and black women that do good things and succeed in this world, not do bad things like join an evil genocidal institution like the US military and then be happy just because they're black. Like, come on. Like, come on. Anyway, let's continue building. So, though that prolonged salute took place in 2010, the racial picture has not improved much since. At the end of 2020, the Defense Department's Diversity and Inclusion Board released a report aimed at identifying ways to improve racial and ethnic diversity in the U.S. military. Among the report's findings, the enlisted ranks of the active and reserve military were slightly more racially and ethnically diverse than its U.S. civilian counterparts, but not the officer corps. Furthermore, it found that the civilian population eligible to become commissioned officers was less racially and ethnically diverse than the civilian population eligible for enlisted service. The breakdown of all active commissioned officers: 73% white, 8% each Black and Hispanic, 6% Asian, 4% multiracial, and less than 1% Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, or Alaskan Native. And the diversity gap widened the higher individuals moved up in the ranks. The report emphasized the increasing importance of the representation of minorities, reflecting the nation's morphing demographics, saying the Defense Department must ensure that all service members have access to opportunities to succeed and advance into leadership positions. Several Black officers interviewed by the AP said the culture must give way if they are ever to flourish. While serving in Afghanistan, one Marine officer recalled being questioned by a white colleague about why he was conversing with fellow Black officers. My response to him was, "I don't ask you why you're always hanging out with white officers," said the Marine, who asked not to be named because he remains on active duty. "Why can't they just be officers? Why the qualifier?" Exactly, man. And that's the thing about, white supremacists or latent white supremacists, or just, some people in general. When white people feel like other white people are hanging out too much with people that are non-white, they consider them traitors, or they consider them people who are, not on code. Because the white supremacists are good on staying on code. They make sure that any white person who speaks up against anti-Black racism or speaks up against white supremacy, that those people will remain permanently exiled from the community, admonished, and that sort of thing. They once said the phrase, people now say the phrase, "Once you go Black, you never go back," as in like a positive thing, right? Or like some sexual innuendo that's meant to be positive towards Black men, right? But honestly, that phrase was started to tell people that, listen, once you side with the Blacks, you can never come back to the white side. You can never be with us, and that sort of thing. And that's exactly, what that sort of story came out right here. One Marine officer, hanging out with some other Black officers, and the other white guys are like, "Why are you hanging out with those negros?" Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. So Thomas Hobbs, an infantry colonel who retired after 27 years of service in the Marine Corps in 2018, was among the officers interviewed who spoke of the pressures of trying to blend into an overwhelmingly white male culture, while also feeling the need to outperform white officers to negate racial stereotypes. Hobbs said the Marines have done better than other branches of the service in recruiting Black candidates into the office corps, but noted that many of them don't stay in the military past their 10th year. At the moment, we have more captains than we have ever had before, he said, but our field grade levels are actually going down. Why don't they stay in? Because they're exhausted for having to act a certain way all the time and they can never be themselves. The Marine who remains on active duty also called it exhausting, adding, not only do you have to deal with your own things, but whenever a Black enlisted Marine gets in trouble, they will come to you and say, oh man, what's wrong with these guys? Coming to you like you're an expert on everything Black. Collier said he felt pressure to act differently from the first moments he was recruited, recalling an encounter at a formal dinner with a Marine major trying to bring him into the service. I was one of 2 Black men who were applying, and he and I were chatting, and the selection officer kind of mentioned to us, hey, you guys might not want to isolate yourselves in this kind of way because it might not look good, Collier said. I mean, this is one of my first experiences involving the Marine Corps, and I have a Marine major telling me I can't talk to another Black person without worrying about how people will look at us if we're purposefully isolating ourselves from the group. And that's the thing that's crazy, man, about being Black in some of these very white institutions or these very rigid institutions. There are like these double rules you have to follow. You have to follow not only the rules to the T, because you as a Black man, if you do one thing wrong, oh, you're definitely going to be X'd out. Imagine the stuff Trump did. He would have been in jail, right? As Black men in these high institutions, you have to follow the rules exactly. And then on top of that, you have to present yourself in a way clean cut and above and beyond, the minimal of what white men do, just to get the same basic treatment or the same recognition or consideration for certain positions. And then on top of that, you have to deal with the politics of other Black people in the office. How do you interact with them? Do you have to say what's up? Do you have to ignore them? Do you have to be in competition with them? Can we congregate together? It's very, very confusing, and it's so mentally taxing. And that's why I'm so glad I work remotely. I don't have to deal with these hidden rules. I don't have to deal with these sorts of situations with, people telling me as a Black man what I can do, what I can't do in the office, how I should act, how I should present myself. I get to choose my own fate, at least in this, realm of my house. You get what I'm saying? And for Black men in the military, especially these officers who are going through these situations, I feel for you, brothers. I really do feel for you. It's very taxing, man. It's very taxing on the mind. Let's continue building. So other service members of color detailed incidents in which they said they were discouraged by superiors from openly embracing their cultures. Some said they were told to avoid speaking languages other than English to not offend their mostly white colleagues. From Air Force Master Sergeant Ricardo Lemos, who was medically discharged in 2019, said a superior once discouraged him from speaking to his mother in Spanish on the phone in the office because people can't understand you. And some Black women detailed the challenges they faced navigating a culture that often labels them as aggressive or difficult, and their natural hair as unkempt or unprofessional. DeMarcus Gilliard, a 34-year-old former Marine captain, told the AP that he felt an unspoken pressure to prove himself better than his peers when he entered the basic school, where new officers learn the ropes, feeling like a symbol of Black Americans. But he said he never experienced overt racism there and credits the Marine Corps for making strides toward diversifying its top ranks. It's a great idea. I don't see color, but it's actually pretty dismissive. And I think that not talking about issues of race actually exacerbates the problem, and we need to be able to talk about these things, said Gilliard. I think the Marine Corps would be a great place to do it. And listen, not every Black person is going to experience overt racism or experience, discrimination blatantly to their face. There have been times in my life, like, for example, my time in Mauritius, where I spoke about, the anti-Black racism that is there, even though I did not see it acted out in front of me. it can happen to anybody, right? Like it can happen to anybody at any time. And not all Black people are going to talk about it. But this brother, DeMarcus Gilliard, at least is not dismissing the idea that racism does exist in the U.S. military. And because if he did, that would make him a coon. And we have to remember, guys, you can talk about your experiences as a Black person, but when you dismiss other people's Black experience, especially when they're talking about the racism that we go through, you are being a coon. You're being an Uncle Tom, and you are a horrible person that we will get retribution of on the day of judgment. So let's continue building. The basic school told the AP that sessions on diversity and inclusion are a core part of the training it offers, including discussions about the negative impact bias has on leadership, decision-making, and cohesiveness. Last year, General David Berger, who became the top general of the Marine Corps in 2019, used the occasion of the Marine Corps Association's annual Modern Day Marine Expo to drive home the message that diversifying the service will save lives. I'm absolutely convinced. Too much similarity, too much that we look all the same, think the same, got the same background. We're going to get killed because we're going to end up with solutions that we're all familiar with, but they're easy to counter, Berger said. Will diversity make the leadership of the U.S. better? Will it make the military better? No, as long as our foreign policy is bad. We need a diversity of thought. We need to diversify away from the aggressive foreign policy that the U.S. military has had for years, where we've been bombing other countries indiscriminately and treating other countries as if they can just be, turned upside down with no problem. That is wrong, and we need to diversify away from that. Until then, I don't mind if the U.S. military is all white. I don't mind if it's full of white supremacists, because it's ran by white supremacists anyway. People who see no problem pushing that button, invading another country, that sort of thing. They're talking about invading Haiti right now and running up in Haiti and shooting at Black people in Haiti. That's what they're really talking about in many countries across the world, especially the U.S. They want to lead a coalition of the willing to take back Haiti. Do we really want Black men going down there shooting at the Haitian people? No. They're really talking about invading Mexico. If Vivek Ramaswamy or Ron DeSantis gets into power, they're seriously considering invading Mexico and shooting at the Mexican people over the drug cartels that white Americans continually buy cocaine from and weed from. Do we really want to be there supporting that? Do we as Black men and Black people need to be down there shooting at the Mexican people because the rich politicians in the U.S. who snort up cocaine like it's nothing continue to fund the cartels? Should we go down there and shoot at them and kill them? No, I would say no. If the white supremacists really want to do that, they can send their sons and daughters. They can send their cousins and brothers. They can send their fathers. But I don't want to see any Black blood die. I don't want to see any Black person's blood spill out of a U.S. military uniform, period. The U.S. is not our friend. The U.S. Army is not our friend, has historically not been our friend. It's full of racists and white supremacists, and we should not, under any circumstance, support what they're doing. That does not mean we go into the Army and disrupt it. We just choose not to participate, period. That's my opinion. Racism in the ranks is not merely a modern stain. For more than half a century ago in 1971, Frank W. Render, a Black man who was Assistant Secretary of Defense, resigned over what he viewed as unequal treatment of people of color. Wow, that's a very high-ranking official. That same year, the Defense Department created what is now known as the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, the Pentagon's premier agency for education and training programs covering diversity and inclusion within the U.S. military. One of its tools is an anonymous, voluntary organizational climate survey that offers a snapshot of a unit's institutional effectiveness and provides commanders with insight into diversity and inclusion issues within their ranks and how they are addressed. Racist, sexual, and bigoted jokes are a daily occurrence in my workplace. A Marine at California's Camp Pendleton wrote in one December 2017 survey, very little has really ever been done to prevent it. Another Marine said slurs were commonly uttered by officers and enlisted colleagues with no repercussions. But not everyone is comfortable filling out the surveys or with being honest. Women assigned to Navy SEAL units, for example, fear they can be identified since the surveys break down demographics by gender, rank, and race, and not many women are assigned to special operation units. Congress and the Defense Department have mandated that the surveys be conducted annually or whenever a unit changes commanders, but response rates vary widely across units. The surveys do not fall under the Federal Records Act, and they are destroyed after 3 years. Using multiple Freedom of Information Act requests, the AP managed to collect surveys from the past 4 years, concentrating on the 11 aircraft carriers in the U.S. Navy fleet due to their large population size, which can mimic a small floating city with more than 5,000 personnel. In surveys collected from 2017, 265 sailors from the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS George Washington, and the USS John C. Stennis, the USS Nimitz, and the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower said they personally experienced racial discrimination. But in the fall of that year, the discrimination question softened, moving from pointed inquiries to broadly asking whether discrimination does not occur. Wow. Interesting. 265 people from these very large boats with about 5,000 people on them each said that they had faced discrimination, or that discrimination was a big problem on the boat or something like that, right? And basically they said, well, let's change the question. Let's change the question, guys. Instead of actually acknowledging what these people are saying, these soldiers that we say we value so much, let's change the question, guys. Does discrimination happen or not? I mean, are you guys sure? This is what white people do. White supremacists do all this all the time. They say, you know what, let's change the question. I mean, does discrimination really happen? The people just said yes, but then they have to ask it again in a softer way, as if they don't know what yes means. It's crazy. And yes, 265 people out of 5,000 times 4 out of 20,000 people or something is a small number. But if it happens to one person, that's more than enough. That's more than enough. And 265 people is a lot. And those are people that maybe just feel comfortable enough expressing it, because a lot of people don't want to rock the boat. There are a lot of Black people in the world who are coons or Uncle Toms, or Black people that, how can I say this, seek white validation more than validating their own experience. So yes, 265 brave people came up and spoke out and saying that this is happening to me. So racism is very prominent in the U.S. military, as we've seen time and time again. But there will still be people that will hear this live stream or read articles like this and say, well, I was stationed in the military and all my best friends were Black and I didn't see color. So I didn't see all the racism that was happening around me. I don't know what they're talking about. Well, 265 people said that they did see it. Hundreds of other people said that they went through racism in the U.S. military. Travis King fled into North Korea because he experienced racism in the U.S. military. So yes, it does exist. And we don't need people to dismiss what we're talking about. So let's continue building here. Since that change in 2019, the latest complete year obtained by AP, more than 1,600 sailors, or 1 in 5, disagreed, saying racial discrimination did take place on their ships, with nearly a third reporting racial jokes, comments, or slurs. Nearly 1 in 4 sailors said they could not use their chain of command to report incidents without fear of retaliation or reprisal, and 4 out of every 10 said discipline is unfairly administered. Wow. So out of the 11 aircraft carriers, the George Washington, John C. Stennis, and Abraham Lincoln performed worse when sailors were asked about racial discrimination and whether they could safely report harassment. In 2019, on the George Washington, for instance, 30% of sailors said unequal treatment occurred based on race, color, or national origin. The AP's request to interview a representative of the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute was referred to the Pentagon, which did not provide anyone with knowledge of the workings of the command climate surveys. In a statement, the Navy called diversity a key component of maintaining our highest state of readiness, adding that certainly our military is better served when it reflects the nation it serves and all of its members are treated with dignity and respect. Yeah. They say this all the time. Yeah, we treat people with dignity and respect in the military, but what do people constantly have to say is happening in the U.S. military? There's racism, there's discrimination. Over and over again, every survey they do, 1 in 5 people, hell yeah, it does happen. A lot of slurs, a lot of comments, all of that. So, as a young airman, Nick Shands didn't initially think much of it when he received a request to report to the medical treatment facility on Mountain Home Air Force Base. But when he arrived, he thought it was strange that he saw only a handful of superiors and a large dumpster. His task, climb in and sift through the garbage for documents containing personally identifiable information. Shands, one of the few black airmen on the Idaho base, was stunned by the order, but clambered over the side of what turned out to be a nearly all-day task as the superiors watched him search fruitlessly. He said it was just one incident among several on the nearly all-white base where he felt singled out, including being told repeatedly that he was built for the military. Very interesting. They asked this man to climb into a garbage can and look at documents. That's dehumanizing. That's horrible. I know the military is tough, right? Like you got to clean the bathroom floor with a toothbrush. But they told this black man, hey, boy, jump in this garbage can now. Jump in this garbage can, boy, and get out all the documents with identifiable information. And meanwhile, they sat back fat with their arms folded, watching this black man in a garbage can sift through paper. That's horrible. That's horrible. And saying he was built for the military, well, their daughters were built for BBC. So I would have clapped back with that and got him discharged. See, that's why I couldn't serve in the military. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't need to serve in the military. It was for the purpose of if it was for the purpose of to embarrass and to mentally break you, I guess that's what they tried to do, he said. Shan said targeted racism and discrimination continued after he left Idaho and served on different bases, leading to him to depart the military in 2018. He believes a tough road lies ahead for the Defense Department and Congress, which provides oversight to address structural racism in the military and prevent other service members from suffering as he did. But a round of sweeping changes to the National Defense Authorization Act, which primarily funds and lays out policies governing the Defense Department and military services, could present a unique opportunity to begin to turn the tide toward systemic change. A bill that was passed earlier this year ordered the Secretary of Defense to devise a plan to remove all names, symbols, displays, and monuments that honored the Confederacy, including the renaming of military bases such as Fort Benning and Fort Hood that honor Confederate leaders. For people that don't know, people outside of the U.S. who might be watching the stream, there was a time, long time ago, when the white supremacists literally tried to overthrow the U.S. government. They tried to separate the U.S. To form their own country called the Confederacy of the United States of America, or the Confederate States of America, whatever, right? And their whole idea was that they are a white supremacist nation. They believe that white people are superior to black people and black people are meant to be slaves to white people. They tried to attack the U.S. government, and they claimed that they just wanted to separate, but really what they wanted to do was make every state in the Union a slave state. Let's keep it a buck. They would not have stopped, if they could, of invading the other states that were trying to fight the Confederate States to keep the Union together. And instead of taking those names of those leaders of this secessionist movement, this insurrectionist movement, and burying them underground, disgracing them, making them seen as the cowards that they were, for trying to overthrow a white supremacist nation already, a nation that allowed them to have slaves and everything. Instead of making these people disgraces, a lot of military places in the U.S. are named after these people. Fort Benning, Fort Hood, there are statues of these people all over the U.S. Some statues of them are in the U.S. Capitol. It's a shame. It's a shame. Showing that the U.S. is a country that does not really care about fighting white supremacy, because actual literal white supremacists who try to form their own nation, destroy the United States of America, separate from the United States of America. These people are honored. These people are honored in the U.S. There are statues of them all around the country and even in the U.S. Capitol, and many other places are named after them. It's a shame. It's a shame. So several years ago, they uncovered a cell of white supremacists down at Fort Bragg. U.S. House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn recalled in an interview with the AP. Were they there because of the attitudes they brought with them, or were they celebrating the fact that Fort Bragg is named after a segregationist? I did not know that. Fort Bragg is named after a segregationist. But then again, if we think about it, segregationists were all of the first presidents of the U.S., basically all of the elected representatives of the U.S., basically all of the Supreme Court justices of the U.S. for a very long time. So am I surprised? No, not really, because if we think about it, every one of them, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, all of them were segregationists from the very beginning. So am I really surprised? No. Anyway, that's one reason those of us here in Congress feel that we need to get rid of all the institutionalization and the celebration of these racist attitudes, Clyburn said. Buried deep within the more than 1,400-page bill are mechanisms aimed at transforming the way the military addresses racism and extremism from within. It lays out tracking and reporting requirements for supremacists, extremists, and criminal gang activity, and creates an inspector general to oversee diversity and inclusion efforts. And it says the military must add questions to its climate surveys that explicitly ask about racism, anti-Semitism, and supremacism. In addition, Shands believes the military, like the nation it is sworn to protect, also needs to do some deep soul searching. Though he has moved on with his life, he carries humiliation and pain that he cannot erase. And that's a shame. Racism is like radiation. You can't see it, but it stays in your body and kills you slowly. Absolutely. And what was I going to say? That the nation doesn't need to do soul searching. The nation needs to do pocket checking and get the money to give reparations to Black Americans, period. The nation needs to give reparations to the people who are descendants of slaves who built the nation. That's the major sin of America. Slavery in itself, I'm going to keep it real, was a major sin, but an even bigger sin is not compensating the people because justice was never produced for us. And that needs to happen, right? So I'll continue reading. In pain that he cannot erase. Still, he will always cherish aspects of his military career as a public health instructor with the USAF, United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine. He had a direct impact on students eager to make a change in the world. He also met his wife in the military. After the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis sparked protests that swept the globe, Shands finally confronted one of his former superiors, a white woman involved with the dumpster task more than a decade ago. After the woman posted in a private military Facebook group that Black Lives Matter, Shands reached out to remind her of the incident, telling her he hoped it didn't take the murders of Black humans to awaken her to the discrimination and racism that exists in both America and the Air Force, including the discrimination she exerted upon him. The woman acknowledged she did not treat Shands well and had been incredibly ignorant to acknowledging and or recognizing many things, including systemic racism and the presence of it in the Air Force, according to the screenshots reviewed by the AP. For Shands, the conversation was cathartic, as others chimed in to offer support, but it also brought home the dualities facing Black Americans and other people of color, inside and out of the military, who are trying to navigate a nation riddled by racism. You're not going to escape racism anywhere in this country, he said. The best interpretation I've ever heard of being in the military, especially a minority or a person of color in the military, is that the military is a microcosm of regular society. Ain't that a shame? And what an ironic statement. You know, after George Floyd got killed, a lot of white people got really woke. Black Lives Matter signs, flags, people posting crazy stuff on Facebook, a lot of brothers getting a lot of pussy from white women just off the strength. I mean, shit was lit for like a good 6 months after George Floyd got killed. But then all the white people who, previously were hella racist or closed-minded about racism and all the stuff that was popping off in America for a long time, they got exposed real quick. Just like this woman here. This woman posted Black Lives Matter. Then it morphed into All Lives Matter. And now it's like Blue Lives Matter. And now it's all this crazy stuff that the white supremacists and the implicit white supremacists post online and that sort of thing. And boy, they got exposed real quick, because people pulled up their old tweets, their old posts, their family members came out, exposed them for who they were and that sort of thing. Showing us, once again, Black people, we have no friends. Black people have no friends in the fight against white supremacy. It's us against the world, and we have to remember that. I found this article very, very interesting about racism in the U.S. military, very deep, very in-depth. You can find this for yourself. All the links for all the articles we will read today will be in the description. Let's keep on building here. So, military still grappling with racism and extremism, investigation finds. So even though this article we read was from 2021, this one is from 2021 as well. Still a problem, still something that needs to be settled and built on. Let's look here. Military still grappling with racism and extremism, investigation finds. This was published by pbs.org on December 29th, 2021. So in February, with the images of violent insurrection in Washington still fresh in the minds of Americans, newly confirmed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin took the unprecedented step of signing a memo directly commanding officers across the military to institute a one-day stand down to address extremism within the nation's armed forces. The stand down came in response to the participation and the subsequent arrest of several veterans and at least one active duty service member who, along with thousands of supporters of former President Donald Trump on January 6, stormed the U.S. Capitol in a melee that sent lawmakers scrambling for safety, left one person fatally shot by Capitol Police, and caused millions of dollars in damage to the building largely seen as a symbol of American democracy. Boy, I'll never forget where I was on January 6th. When January 6th happened, I was in Serbia. I had just got done smoking some fire kush, smoking some fire kush with my landlord in Belgrade. And I got a notification on my iPhone saying that the Capitol was under attack. And I was like, what? Because I was like lit. And then I turned on like a live stream on YouTube of the news, and I could not believe a crowd of mayonnaise, a sea of trucker hats and camo gear, all storming into the U.S. Capitol, screaming, "Hang Mike Pence." I was like so glad to be in Serbia, and I felt so embarrassed to be an American. I stayed in my apartment that night just watching the footage over and over again. I was just saying, these crackers are crazy. These crackers are crazy, storming the Capitol. And I was not surprised either, because leading up all to that time, Trump was saying the election was stolen, the election was rigged, like delegitimizing the entire process, saying that they were going to, take back the country and that sort of thing. So I was not surprised that it was happening. I was just surprised, just how blatant and how open it was, like the idea that you could just take over the Capitol just because your guy lost an election, just because you're so butthurt, just because you don't know how to take a loss. The white supremacists, the racists, they were out in full effect there, waving Confederate flags, screaming that they were going to, R-word Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that they were going to kill, what's her name, Nancy Pelosi, that they were going to hang Mike Pence, breaking into the Capitol, live streaming their feet on the desk. I just remember watching all of it, high as hell in Belgrade, Serbia, thinking, these crackers crazy. I'll never forget January 6th. That was a crazy day, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. It made me feel as sick to my stomach the day Trump got elected and the day that January 6th happened. That was one of the weirdest moments in American history, and that was one of the last times I really got high, actually, because I don't smoke weed. It's on occasions. I'm an occasional smoker, guys. Occasional smoker. Anyway, let's continue building. So Austin's order, which also came as America as a whole was grappling with how to address systemic racism, was the latest in a series of decades-long efforts by the military to purge its ranks of extremists and white supremacists. Last week, in response to the order, the military issued new rules to deal with extremism that included social media usage policy updates where liking and reposting white nationalist and extremist content could result in disciplinary action. The Department of Defense also updated its screening of recruits and is looking at how to prepare troops who are retiring from being targeted by extremist organizations. I think a lot of the former U.S. Soldiers, like Marines, anybody that comes out of the U.S. military, a lot of these guys are disaffected and they're shell-shocked and they have no real usable skills. So these are the perfect targets for extremist groups to reach out to. A lot of the, neo-Nazis and white supremacists that you see marching in the streets, a lot of them are former military guys who did service in Iraq and Afghanistan, came back, couldn't get a real job, ended up on drugs, ended up hanging out with these, crazy right-wing guys who stay on 4chan's poll all day, or 8chan, or Stormfront, and that sort of thing. They get bought into their ideology because now they got another unit of guys who think they're tough and macho, and then they hang out with them. Next thing you know, they're, doing Nazi salutes in the streets, talking about, Jews will not replace us. I mean, this is the pipeline. The U.S. military not only harnesses the training and skills for the white supremacists of tomorrow who end up invading the Capitol and end up toppling the U.S. government like they're trained to topple other governments in the world. They also are great places that output people that will be recruited by other white supremacist groups that enact that ideology. It's like how the Nation of Islam, unfortunately, a lot of people that convert to the Nation of Islam, not Islam, Orthodox Sunni Islam, but the Nation of Islam, unfortunately, they come out of the prison system. Or people are indoctrinated into hardcore religious extremism, Islamic extremism in prison, unfortunately, because these places are where people, men usually, that don't have a lot of options, a lot of opportunity. They've been exiled from society, outcasted from their communities, and now they're perfect recruits to be brought into extremist organizations. That's sort of the crazy thing that the military does, right? Bring in these poor, stupid, ignorant, usually white men, largely white men, or white adjacent men, like a lot of Hispanics. Unfortunately, some Hispanics are white supremacists leaning or openly racist or openly anti-Black. Give them military training, then spit them out there in the world to either do evil foreign policy on behalf of the U.S. government abroad, or do their time, get that training, and then get spat out into the world, and then join hateful organizations that want to inflict harm on other Americans. It's crazy. It's crazy. But an AP investigation found that despite the new rules, racism and extremism remain an ongoing concern in the military. The investigation shows the new guidelines do not address ongoing disparities in military justice under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the legal code that governs the U.S. Armed Forces. Numerous studies, including a report last year from the Government Accountability Office, show Black and Hispanic service members were disproportionately investigated and court-martialed. A recent Naval Postgraduate School study found that Black Marines were convicted and punished at court-martial at a rate 5 times higher than other races across the Marine Corps. The AP investigation also shows the military's judicial system has no explicit category for hate crimes, something that federal government, 46 states, and the District of Columbia have on the books, making it difficult to quantify crimes motivated by prejudice. Ain't that a shame? So not only is there an explicit amount of hate crimes and discrimination that happens against Black people in the U.S. military, but on top of that, Black people are more likely to get court-martialed, to get found guilty of some sort of military crime and that sort of thing. Ain't that a shame? Ain't that the double irony? It's that the military is like the U.S. in miniature. Everything you'll find in the U.S., especially unfair treatment in the criminal justice system or explicit anti-Black racism and hate crimes, that happens in the military too, just on a much smaller but more concise scale. Ain't that crazy? Ain't that crazy? All right. As a result, the investigative agencies such as the Naval Criminal Investigative Service or Army Criminal Investigative Division also don't have a specific hate crime category, which impacts how they investigate cases. While it's possible hate crimes have occurred, our investigations are not titled as such, the NCIS said in an email. For example, an assault on a person, regardless of the reason for the assault, would still be categorized as an assault, regardless of what motivated the crime. So they're calling all assaults assaults, despite if the person assaulted somebody and then yelled a racial slur at them. I think that should be taken into consideration because that would be taken into consideration in the civilian world as well. The new National Defense Authorization Act, signed into law by President Biden on Monday, directs the Secretary of Defense to make a recommendation to Congress within 180 days if a new statute is needed to address violent extremism, but does not address hate crimes or racial disparities in military law. The new Pentagon rules do not outright ban service members from being members of extremist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, Oath Keepers, or other right-wing and white nationalist groups. The regulations, like the previous ones, only prohibit active participation in such groups, a murky policy and that civil rights organizations have raised concerns about for years. The military describes active participation as publicly demonstrating or rallying, fundraising, recruiting, and training members, as well as organizing or leading organizations. Very interesting. So you can be a member of the KKK and join the U.S. Army, but you just can't be an active member. What the hell is an active member? Like you put your hood on Saturdays, but not Sundays. Like what is that? What is that? And I know I made a video a few months ago, maybe about a year ago. Should white supremacists serve in the U.S. military? I would say yes. Yes, they should. The same way that I would want communists, Marxists, Stalinists, Leninists, Maoists, to be able to serve in the U.S. military, because if you believe in the U.S. government and the Constitution, that does not preclude you from having an ideology that might be antagonistic to some of the core tenets, right? Some people would say communism or socialism or Leninism is not cohesive with U.S. capitalistic ideology or our ideology about democracy and freedom. Okay, you could argue that. But I, as an American, still have the right, or I should have the right, to serve my country as long as I follow all the laws. My ideological or political belief should not prohibit me from doing such. And I would argue that also extends to the white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan in general, because inherently joining the Ku Klux Klan, while it might be unethical and distasteful and stupid, it's not inherently violent. Unless you join the KKK and you explicitly go outside and start shooting at Black people and burning crosses on people's lawns, committing vandalism and that sort of thing, I don't think that should prohibit you from joining the U.S. military. But I will make this clear once and finally, once again, Black people should not be serving in the U.S. military anyway, because it is inherently white supremacist. We are going abroad. You are doing the service of people who literally want to destroy other people, other minorities, other poor people across the world. Black people should not be flying to Afghanistan, Iraq, other countries around the world, the next place America invades next, whatever, and doing the bidding of people who want to keep hegemonic capitalists and white supremacists in power, period. If they want to do that, let there be a white face under that helmet. There should be no shoot at other third world and poor people who look similar to us on the behalf of the U.S. government, period, point blank. Let the white supremacists have the U.S. military. We don't need it. We don't want any parts of it. That's my opinion. All right. So experts interviewed by the AP say there's also ongoing concern over the military commander's ability to enact a wide range of administrative and disciplinary actions, including administrative separation or appropriate criminal action against military personnel who engage in prohibited activities. Commanders essentially have total discretion to determine how to address situations as they arise, which experts say has created non-uniform scattershot enforcement, with some commanders establishing a no-tolerance approach and others employing weak enforcement of the rules. The AP investigation also found that while the Department of Defense says it considers racism and extremism within the military to be a security concern, it does not have dedicated funding that specifically supports efforts to address extremism. Instead, military officials said the Pentagon uses personnel vetting programs, training and education programs, and the Insider Threat Program to positively contribute to countering extremism within the force. The Pentagon did not respond to questions about how much money it has spent or budgeted for efforts solely related to diversity and inclusion, and how many employees are dedicated to it. Pentagon spokesperson Major Cesar Santiago acknowledged in a statement to the AP that extremism and extremist ideology can have an outsized effect on the military force. But he added, the vast majority of the women and men in uniform serve their nation with honor and integrity, he said. Since taking office in January, Secretary Lloyd Austin, the first African American to serve as Secretary of Defense, has taken immediate action to address extremism. In addition to the new guidelines on extremism, the Defense Department appointed an interim Deputy Inspector General for Diversity and Inclusion and Military Insider Threats in April. Susan Court, the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center's Intelligence Project, commended the Defense Department for taking key steps this year, including the changes announced last week to address extremism. She said the Defense Department sought the expertise of civil rights organizations, academics, and others who have sounded the alarm about the dangers of extremism in the ranks for years. But Court said it's too soon to definitely say whether the updated policies will purge extremism from military ranks. The devil will be in the details, she said. I do appreciate that there is a commitment from the Defense Department to have much more consultation with outside partners, and that there's much more focus on doing additional research. So we're going to hold their feet to the fire. Court said the Southern Poverty Law Center is still pressing for additional reforms, including how the military's command structure allows commanders to have virtually absolute command authority over subordinates, which might discourage members from reporting incidents or concerns of extremism. I think there should be, some civilian board to look at cases of extremism, because one of the great things about the U.S. military is that, we have civilian oversight of the military. A lot of other countries, the military is ingrained in the institutions, and that's why you have coups that happen. But the military should answer to the people. And if there are these egregious complaints about racism or discrimination within the military, as much as I don't want Black people to join it, Black people will continue to join it, but we need to make sure that the Black people within there are protected. And so there should be a civilian oversight board to make sure that cases of discrimination get to go to people who are not connected in the military and that cannot punish those people just for speaking out against what they're going through or getting justice for what they're going through. You get what I'm saying? So even some in the military agree that the armed forces needs to do more. There needs to be a change in action and behaviors, elements that can't be so easily influenced by a change in the military law, said Marjorie Tyrone Collier, a judge advocate in the Marine Corps Reserve, in an interview with the AP. Even if some legislation is passed from the highest echelons of government that says you will do this and that, will it actually get done? Collier said. And that's the end of the article. Very interesting article. Once again, a lot of racism and white supremacy existing in the U.S. military. We have to get rid of that. We have to advocate for our people not to be serving in these institutions that do not respect us. And we have to remember that Black men and Black women have served in the U.S. military honorably and notably, but some have gone above and beyond the call of duty and answered to a higher moral purpose that they saw fit, and defected to the other side or resisted the racism that existed in the U.S. military. I found this article very interesting, and this will be the last one we'll read today. This is from liberationnews.org. It's titled The Hidden History of Black Soldiers' Resistance, published on February 25th, 2019. Throughout U.S. history, Black people have called out the contradiction of being sent to kill and die in the U.S. military, supposedly for freedom and human rights, while being denied them at home. Legendary boxer Muhammad Ali famously explained his refusal to fight in the Vietnam War. No Viet Cong ever called me never. Ali joined in a long tradition of Black anti-war sentiment, which found expression inside the military itself, as Black service members have repeatedly come to identify more with those targeted by U.S. imperialism than the racist politicians ordering them into war. A long tradition of resistance. Gullah slaves fled South Carolina and Georgia to join Seminole communities in Spanish Florida. They fought for freedom in long guerrilla wars against the United States, before being forced along the Trail of Tears into Oklahoma. Seminoles of African descent later escaped Oklahoma Indian Territory in large numbers and went into Mexico, establishing communities along the border with Texas Territory. They were a forward front against U.S. forces after the Mexican-American War, frequently fighting off Texas slave traders. Very interesting story. Black people consistently have fought against the U.S. government whenever they were oppressing not only us, but also the Native Americans as well. Very, very interesting history right here. For people that don't know, Texas went to war with Mexico, essentially, because a lot of white Americans were moving into Texas illegally. They were illegal immigrants moving into Texas, bringing their slaves, even though Mexico explicitly forbade slavery and said slavery will not exist in Mexico. And instead, the white Americans illegally moved into Texas. They were bringing their drugs, their crime. They were rapists. They were everything bad. And they brought that into Texas. Mexico said no. They went to war, and Texas won the war only because the U.S. helped them out and that sort of thing. And Black Americans consistently fought against the slaveholders on the Mexican side against the U.S. government to try to make Texas a free state. So in 1899, after U.S. forces invaded and occupied the Philippines to capture it as a colony, Black soldier David Fagan defected to Emilio Aguinaldo's guerrilla army, along with several other Black service members. Fagan was so successful in combating the U.S. units that he rose to the rank of captain in the guerrilla army and became known as General Fagan among Filipino freedom fighters. His defection became international news, and U.S. commanders made his capture an obsession, putting a bounty on his head of $600. The military executed 2 other Black defectors to set an example for others. There should be a movie made about David Fagan, man. Seriously, though that movie probably would not be made in Hollywood, but I hope the Philippines does it because that's a very dope story. Very dope story. David Fagan said, I know I was sent halfway across the world to kill people who are poor like me, oppressed like me, by white people who look just like me in my homeland, and I'm not going to do it. He joined in with the Filipinos and clapped back. Hero. Absolute hero. In 1953, after the Korean War, Corporal Clarence Adams and 2 other black soldiers were part of 21 U.S. troops who chose to live in China instead of participating in a prisoners of war swap. Adams, in particular, cited racism in the United States for his commitment to communist China. He broadcasted for Radio Hanoi during the Vietnam War from China, calling on other black soldiers to throw down their weapons and go back to fight inequality at home. The Vietnamese liberation fighters frequently sent the same message to U.S. troops on the ground in flyers and billboards. Very interesting story. Very interesting story. I think I have a picture of Clarence Adams. Clarence Adams got him a nice Chinese woman, popped out a few babies, lived in China. Man, he lived his life. Big baller, shot calling. Shout out to Clarence Adams, man. So in 1944 and 1945, Battle of the Bulge was the first fully desegregated battle in U.S. history, which took place only out of necessity to defend against Hitler's advance. Around 2,000 black soldiers were enlisted for combat. After the war, however, many black troops decided to stay in France, where segregation did not exist. Other World War II veterans returned and became emboldened proponents of the civil rights movement, including leaders like Medgar Evers. A member of the White Citizens Council assassinated Evers in his driveway 18 years later. Very interesting story. I did not know that Medgar Evers served in the U.S. Army and fought in the Battle of the Bulge, or that he was out there. In fact, I can't even imply that Medgar Evers went to the Battle of the Bulge, but very interesting that he served in the U.S. military. And rest in peace to Medgar Evers. And so Vietnam War and racism. The early part of the Vietnam War revealed that the U.S. government and military saw black troops as cannon fodder. Blacks made up about 12% of the total U.S. civilian population, but about 22% of casualties for the first several years of the conflict. My God, that's bloodshed. That's ethnic genocide, man. That's like what Putin is doing in Russia to the ethnic minorities in Russia, sending those young Asian boys to go die on the front lines in Ukraine. Embarrassing. These numbers only began to change when the disproportionate assignment of black soldiers to firing teams and patrol became a big issue in the civil rights movement, Black Power movement, and inside the military itself. Black service members often led the way in acts of resistance and refusals to serve among soldiers. Because of these actions, coupled with the systemic racism of the U.S. military, the notorious Long Binh Jail, a military prison, was disproportionately black. Over 700 incarcerated soldiers were crammed in a space made for about 400 people, with some put in shipping containers because of a lack of space. Torture, literally torture. In 1968, some white sailors responded to Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination by donning Ku Klux Klan hoods, burning crosses, and raising a Confederate flag. Dr. King had come out strongly against the war a year earlier, risking alienation from his powerful Democratic friends. In response to these racist incidents, their inhumane conditions, and assault from white guards, a handful of black prisoners at Long Binh Jail led an uprising that began on August 29, 1968, and lasted over a week, evolving into a full-blown revolt against the army. One white prisoner was killed and dozens were injured before the end of the rebellion, which destroyed the camp. Very interesting story. That reminds me of this movie, The 25th. Very great movie. If you have not seen The 25th, you need to go watch it. Excellent movie about black soldiers in Houston rising up against the U.S. government when they were, literally about to kill them. Let's go here. At home, black soldiers played a key role in the dynamic and large GI resistance movement, which joined anti-war marches, refused to fight, confronted the officer corps, and revolted in the barracks. The National Black Anti-War Anti-Draft Union was formed in 1968, associated with the Black Panther Party and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. At their first national conference, they laid out a simple program to fight the draft in Vietnam War that called for, among other things, mass refusal to register with Selective Service, black lawyers to defend war resistors, members of local draft boards, and black civil servants to disrupt the Selective Service process, and black service members to apply for conscientious objector status and organize against ROTC. In 1969, 15 members of NBA WADU broke into the Selective Service Office and burnt draft eligible files. Bravo, bravo. For people that don't know, the draft is when the military says you have to go to war, and Vietnam was the last war where we had a draft, though it could come back because every man in the U.S. has to sign up for selective service, which is basically a draft in reserve if they ever need it, right? So, these black people were organizing, saying, listen, anybody that doesn't want to fight, we'll protect you. We'll get lawyers for you. We'll bail you out of jail. We'll try to break into the Selective Service Office and burn the draft files and that sort of thing. That's awesome. That's what we're talking about, unity. And see, all the people that say, oh, black people have never stuck together, black people have never unified, we've been unified. When it's really time to come together and be on code, black Americans, at least, are unified in fighting white supremacy and standing up for the liberation of all people around the world. Because the main people standing up saying America should not go fight in Vietnam or in Korea or in the Philippines and that sort of thing have always been black Americans, first and foremost. So during Black History Month, few commemorations will contain these episodes of radical and revolutionary struggle while fighting at home against the hypocrisy of the U.S. government. Generations of black service members have stood and fought against U.S. imperialism abroad. In the present day march forward, it is dedicated to the struggle against racism inside and outside the military. It informs service members of their rights to refuse deployment to Afghanistan and says to them, we have more in common with the people of Iraq and Afghanistan than we do with the millionaires who tell us we must fight them. Very interesting story. Very, very, very interesting story. So I think we'll end with this right here. So this young brother, Travis King, as we saw from all of our readings today, possibly was in a situation in an institution that is inherently anti-black, where racism is rife, where black men are punished for crimes in the military way more than white men, and I'm pretty sure they commit them at the same rate. Black men and women suffer in the U.S. military. And so Travis, in his desperation, sought refuge with the North Koreans. Unfortunately, North Korea is also anti-black as well and racist because, as you see, they let in tons of white people who deserted to North Korea and let them stay, let them become movie stars, let them live there, let them marry their women. But Travis, you got to go. So once again, proving that black people don't have any friends anywhere in the world. We can't count on North Korea to save us. We can't count on Arabs or Latin Americans or anybody else to save us to fight against white supremacy. We have to deal with it ourselves. The military is no place for a black man to be in or work in. We are doing the biddings of people way more powerful than us. And by powerful, I mean they have more money. I'm talking about the evil capitalists who profit off war, whether we win or lose. People who have no respect for black life. They have no problem sending black soldiers out there to die in the jungles of Vietnam or in the deserts of Iraq. We should not be serving white supremacist hegemonic rule across the world by donning these fatigues and military gear. It's not for us to do. I do not encourage any black person to do it. But if you do it, do not disrupt the army. Do not commit any crimes in there. Just get out of it. Get out of it, or get your Dodge Challenger or your Benz or whatever you want to buy. Then get out of it, man. It's not worth your sanity, your freedom, your life, that sort of thing. A lot of black men end up in the military and take their own lives. Like my very good friend, George Anthony Wade Jr., rest in peace, took his life at 24 years old after serving 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not right. I hope Brother King gets his mind right, gets his life together, gets a new lease on life. You know, he's only 23 years old or something like that, so he has a lot of living left to do. I hope he's mentally well as well, and I hope that the military one day can be a place where all Americans can serve in there and be free of discrimination and feel free to really stand up and defend the country. But America first has to end its evil foreign policy across the world, and America has to treat its citizens right at home before black people can even consider serving in the military. And that's all I have to say about that. I want to thank everybody who came into the chat for this live stream. Shout out to Greg Mack. Shout out to Messi McGuire. Shout out to Dom John. Shout out to, I don't know what Alex Beats said, but Alex Beats says something. I don't know what he said. But yeah, shout out to everybody who came in and showed love to me. And yeah, we'll be doing more live streams on this channel, and we'll be building more. So thank you for everybody, and peace.